Do you need a Sorceress build that can clear T12 all the way to T15 plus maps, even at level 70, while also being able to one-shot rares and bosses, and maintain high AoE damage, and also having good survivability baked in, without needing a single unique piece or any high-end gear? Then I got the Sorceress build for you. What's up, world? It's Utopia back in with another video. Today we're checking out all things Path of Exile 2. Okay, so we'll jump into the skill gems, we'll jump into the passive tree, and of course this build does not require a single unique. So if you're tired of seeing guides with people that have 500 to 600, even 1,000 exalts worth of gear, this gear did not cost me a single exalt, although you can purchase a lot of this gear for 1 exalt or less if you need to do so to build your resistances or mana or what have you. First off though, we'll jump into our skill gems. Now this one of course doesn't matter here, this is just for our wand. But next up here we do take Sigil of Power, where we aren't linking with our second equipped slot. That way it's on our staff. This provides us a bonus damage when we do actually encounter a boss. You see here we do cast that down, but then as soon as we want to switch to our Ball Lightning ability, that will swap to our wand. Next up here we do have Ball Lightning, where we are taking Unleash, then Scattershot, as well as Deceleration. Now the last one is pretty obvious, that will make the Ball Lightning slower. We also have Scattershot that will increase that, and the Seals that will also increase those further. Next up here I am taking Mana Tempest, as I don't have enough for Blink, but if you have around 220 Spirit, you can actually get yourself Blink here instead, but for right now I do have Mana Remnants, as it just utilizes my last 30 Spirit there. Next up we are taking Blasphemy. Now this is a swap off of the Cast on Freeze ability. You can use Cast on Freeze if you'd like, which is my prior build. I'll link to it down below so you can see. However, that does require a unique, but it is only 1 exalt overall. However, you will lose a lot of survivability. As you see here, we have 3.9 on our shield, whereas if we do equip this, we'll only have around 2,800, and we will have to provide some dexterity, where we can just go into int as of right now, mostly with a few dexterity nodes. But Blasphemy is very good because we are doing constant AoE damage and we are within melee range typically. Next up we are taking Spark, and we're using Controlled Destruction, we're using Acceleration, Arcane Tempo, and Inspiration. You don't have to utilize Spark. Spark is mostly just an ability for range. If you do kind of run out of mana and you want to be able to utilize some range abilities, it does do a significant amount of damage, and it is up there with Lightning Warp, but Lightning Warp is going to be our main ability. Where we do have Lightning Warp here, and we are taking Overcharge, which is increasing our magnitude, which I'll get into in a bit. We also are taking Magnified Effect, and then we're taking Lightning Exposure. Again, in combination with our Ball Lightning, when we do cast those, we can teleport to the Ball Lightnings, and that will do some AoE damage. And that is our main cast ability. You'll also see that mobs will get a blue skull that is dependent on their percentages. Next up here we are taking Conductivity, which is also with our Blasphemy. We have Conductivity slotted here, but we also have it just in case we need a range slot for our main bosses, or bosses that do have to be kind of fought at range. That still allows us to apply a curse to them even though we're not in melee range. We are taking Focused Curse for that, as well as Heightened Curse. Next up here we do have Lightning Conduit. This is our main single target damage ability, and I had a lot of comments about single target damage kind of not providing as much damage as people like. However, we'd have Elemental Focus here, Super Critical, and then Ambush. Now the way that we can provide a good AoE damage is when we do actually teleport on a target and apply shock to them. The way you can do that is by putting Spark down and then also teleporting to them with Ball Lightning and your Lightning Warp, providing all this shock on the floor here. Once this is down, this is going to provide a magnified effect there that we do also have on there, which is with our Overcharge, as well as some stuff on our skill tree that I'll talk about in a bit. We then can pop our Rune and Mana Tempest, which I'll get to in a second. After those two abilities are down, we can then pop our Lightning Conduit, which will do a ton of single target damage. We can one-shot bosses and rares. Although more than likely you're going to be downing rares very quickly with Lightning Warp, this is mostly for bosses and single target damage. We do also, of course, as I said, take Mana Tempest, just does give us a buff, and we are taking Premeditation, which will also give us a significant damage boost. And then last up, we're taking Archmage with our Spirit, that gives us Lightning Mastery and Clarity for our 2 support gems here. Clarity, again, giving us a 30% mana increase while it's active, which is always. Next up here, we'll go over to our passive tree, where I have optimized this quite a bit and done a lot of experimenting with it. Our main stuff here is I've kind of taken away our cast speed here that we don't really need, and I've also come over in here and given us some more mana. The main stuff in our passive tree that I've changed here is the magnified effect, or the magnitude to shock. Now you really want to have this magnitude shock effect. This will increase your damage exponentially. Even though we have things like elemental damage, you actually want the magnitude more so than that. So we're coming over here, we're getting this magnitude here. We're also coming up here and getting some magnitude stuff here and some lightning damage. And then we're also getting it up here with our exposure. So we're kind of combining both of those things there, where eventually we will jump over into here and get even more energy shield as well as some more magnitude stuff. I'll include a build guide that has more of the passive tree done, so people that are like level 80 and 90 can also utilize this guide, as I'm currently around 73, 74, so we are lacking a bit of the skill tree there, but I will combine it all together so that you can utilize this if you are a little bit higher level than me. Again, most of this stuff we're not really utilizing our jewel spots. The jewels do cost a ton. If you have a ton of exalts, then more than likely you'll want to have a lot of jewel sockets here. You might even come down and get these jewel sockets and these up here and even this one right here as well. But for right now, we don't have a ton, and we also don't have a ton of exalts, so we're not going to be spending it like that. I also wanted to keep this guide on the cheaper side as far as gear goes. Now you will only need about 3 dexterity nodes down here and maybe potentially some strength nodes to equip some of your slots here, but overall I do have the 3 dexterity nodes right here. And we have a lot of energy shield stuff, some elemental damage. We also are taking mind over matter. Some people do this with gem slots, some people do this with Eldritch Battery in combination. However, in order to take all of this, which typically they do mind over matter, they do Eldritch Battery, and they also do the Chaos Inoculation. In order to do that, you do actually require a specific amulet that is going to require a Divine Orb, which are quite expensive. In fact, they're around 60 or 70 exalts. So again, trying to keep this guide very cheap to get you to the high tiers. You can clear T12 very easily. T15 won't be exactly a struggle, but you will again have to be cautious. Overall, again, you can clear those maps, and I do showcase that I am actually going to those T12s to T15s. As in some of my guides, people pointed out that I have the quest here for T2, but I have just been buying keystones or waystones instead of actually farming them up, as they take forever when you are an early level, and I figured there was no point for me to do so, especially if the build can actually handle the higher tiers. I'll go over my gear very quickly, but it doesn't matter as long as you have your resistances built up to around 75%. More than likely you are going to want to build a lot of resistances and spirit on your chest piece as well as your amulet. That's going to be how you're going to get a significant amount of that spirit there. I would also look to get increased rarity of items if you can with max mana on everything else, as you don't really need energy shield on these. You're not going to get a ton of energy shield maybe on your focus, but 82 overall here, even with my buff here of 20%, is not a ton. As you see when we take it off there, it's only around, and it's around 400 when we do have all the buffs in place. But even especially for gloves, you'll see it's not that much. It's around only 120 shield there, even less. So it's not a ton of shield there. You really do want to focus on maximum mana as well as your increased item rarity, as those will get you map drops. Those are going to get you the divine orbs as well as the exalted orbs. So I would focus on that mostly, where your chest piece and your helmet should be where most of your energy shield would come from. You see right here I have 302 on my helmet. If I take my helmet off, it knocks down over 1,500 on my energy shield. So it is quite significant there with all the buffs. And just to recap, again, this can do high single target damage and AoE damage. As we saw with Ball Lightning, you're just teleporting to it, you're also clearing mobs that way, and you're also placing this down with the boss, where you then place down your Mana Tempest, you then place down your Rune Power, and then you can go into Lightning Conduit, which will do significant damage. You'll see it'll pump the damage numbers up while we're standing in this. We have Lightning Warp all the way up to 10k, and Lightning Warp, or Lightning Conduit rather, all the way up to 4 there with both of those in place. So everything goes up to even 5 and 6. Now this damage might be a little bit higher for you if you do have a lot of rune slots, or a lot of gem slots rather, jewel slots on your passive tree. You can also knock this really high up once you start getting these 16, 17, and even 18 gems. I can't use it right now, I'm only level 75. I do have an 18 gem, so this will get really high in damage. You'll be able to clear bosses very easily, and if you do have the right gear, you can do so. But this is just showcasing you that all this gear cost me exactly nothing, except maybe 1 or 2 with 1 exalts. You really don't need to do so, but if you'd like to get that increased rarity and some max mana higher, then you can do that. Overall, it should about cover for today's video. If you'd like to subscribe, into the next one. Deuces.